Good morning. Hi, this is Anil Vanwari, founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of the 20-year-old Indian Television.com group. Our biggest product is the direct-to-consumer platform Tele, which attracts 100 million unique viewers annually and generates 1 billion views. Then there is Indian Television.com, which aggregates cable TV executives, production executives, DTH executives, advertising executives, media executives, marketeers, OTT platform executives, tech players, and what have you. It's the leader in its space, which is in the space of video, television and OTT, and cable TV and DTH. RadioandMusic.com is another platform we run. It is focused at the FM radio and music B2B fraternity, and also at fans of music and radio, guys who follow what's going on with the jockeys on radio. We also run the world's third largest animation, VFX, gaming, and comics destination, animationexpress.com, which is like a Bible for the industry in a way. It's about 16 years old. These are the digital publications we run online. The group is also into production. We are producing close to 1,000 videos at least a month. And we also have been producing the 20-year-old Indian Tele Awards, which is the most respected awards for TV actors, OTT actors, technicians, which has been aired by Star, by ANTV, by Sony, by Colors, over its life as a consumer property. We also have a string of leading industry platforms like VidNet, which is in its 5th year, and it's for the OTT ecosystem, brings together everyone, right from the platforms to the advertising agencies, to technology companies, to writers, to brands. You know, it's a must attend for the industry and whoever's involved in streaming. IDOS is a platform which we run, which is targeted at TV and broadband distribution. It's in its 16th year and has been happening in Goa, but we moved it to Bombay in recent times. The industry is going through its tough patch at this moment, especially the distribution industry for video. The Content Hub is a gathering of those involved in the creation of content for TV, film, and OTT. We have close to 1,000 people attending it, a lot of them writers, directors, platforms, distributors, aggregators. They all come together, 1,000 of them coming together to discuss how content is being made and how they can contribute to the content creation process. We also run the Media and HR Summit, and there are numerous other platforms. There's games, esports, and more, which is coming up. The Kids Animation and More Summit, which is coming up. These have all become digital properties until the market opens up fully and we get a chance to go back to venues and create them. Additionally, like the Times of India looks after the Cannes Lions, I'm in charge of MIPCOM, MIPTV, MIPJunior, MIPTalk, the world's largest gathering for content syndication, that's video content syndication, and co-production, which takes place in the same city of Cannes that the Cannes Lions take place. I've been doing this for the past 15 years for the regions of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. I'm responsible for the sales for these regions. I also look after the Asia Television Forum, which takes place in Singapore. Again, the largest gathering in Asia for video content creators. The largest companies in the world assemble at MIPCOM, MIPTV, ATF. The creators of content, whether it's Banijay, whether it's Fremantle, whether it's BBC, whether it's Fox, whether it's Warner, they all assemble at these markets. MIP Cancun is another market I look after, which takes place in Cancun, and MIP China, which takes place in Hangzhou. Finally, there's Esports Bar, the largest gathering of esports and gaming professionals and executives, which take place in Miami and Cannes. That's a lot about me. Now let's get on to our our guest for the day. Amongst a few colleagues, Ashish Bhasin is known as Pac-Man. Reason? The advertising and media professionally diligently studies the landscape and then pursues a company which he thinks will add some skill sets to its portfolio and top line as well, taking Dentsu Aegis network closer to the #1 position that he so much desires to take his agency to. He then gobbles it up with founders, executives, and all, gives it the much needed umbrella of his agency's large network, helping accelerate its growth. This is something he has not done in some time. Actually, it's about, I think, some 10 months or 10, or I think it should be 10 months, at least, thanks to the pandemic and the fact that it's paralyzed, semi-paralyzed activity on the business front, in India especially. Starting with 50 employees, today Dan has close to 3,500 is what I read, across 24, or is it 25 brand agencies? Ashish will tell us more about it. There's Cara, Dentsu X, Dentsu, Fountainhead, iProspect, Posterbar, Posterscope, Storylab, Visium, Amnet, Merkel, Socrati, Dentsu Impact, Dentsu One, Dentsu India, Dentsu Web Chutney, Milestone Brandcom, Taproot Dentsu, Watt Consult, Perfect Relations. Happy McGarry Bobbin. I don't know how the Punjabis are pronouncing this name. They'll find it a challenge. I'm finding it a challenge. Fractal Link, Dentsu Aegis Network, Consult, SVG Media, Columbus, Dan Data Lab. And it looks like there's no stopping him and Dan. Hence, we are happy to have him with us. Thank you for joining us. Ashish, good morning. I trust all is well.
Good morning. Lovely to be with you. Yes, as well as it can be in these times of lockdown, but we have to be positive. So all is good.
Great. Have you had a chance to read Gone with the Wind once more, or watch The Sound of Music in this pandemic and lockdown and opening up? Play snooker and billiards. I'm sure snooker billiards may have not been possible, but chess would have been.
Chess, I have been playing regularly. I haven't read Gone with the Wind or watched the movie in this pandemic, but I do tend to watch it at least 2 or 3 times a year if I get the opportunity. Sound of Music, I did, coincidentally, just about 2 weeks ago.
Great. What do you like about the film?
About Gone with the Wind, I think...
the film and the book, both.
Well, actually, it's first of all, I think it's probably the only one where the book and the film are both as good as each other. So Margaret Mitchell has really excelled in that, as indeed the filmmaking has. Otherwise, you rarely, most often I find the film is worse than the book that you read, but there are exceptions. I think Godfather was another one which was an exception, where you find that the book is excellent and the movie is excellent. More importantly, I think it's to me, Gone with the Wind is like a whole culture, a whole era which just went away with the wind, and a different set of values which prevailed changed, and a new set of values came in. And it also shows you how some people hang on to them and some people adapt better. And I think human values at their best. And
Clark Gable and Vivian Leigh really,
of course,
Clark Gable made it historical, but the book has in recent times received a lot of flack. Especially the movie also, because of the...
It has, because times change, context changes. But what I like the best about it is perhaps I think it's the last line, which is that tomorrow is another day.
Absolutely.
So you go through everything, and then tomorrow is another day, and a new set of challenges and a new set of life sort of moves on. And I think to that extent, Gone with the Wind also, tomorrow is another day. It's got to be reinvented in today's world.
Fantastic. What about The Sound of Music?
Well, that's lovely. It's something I saw the movie with my father in the Regal Theatre, now perhaps 45, 50 years ago. And it's just something that just appeals to you, as a kid as well as as an adult. I got an opportunity a couple of years ago to go to Salzburg and do the Sound of Music tour that they do as well. Of course, the music is great. It's eternal in some ways, but just the freewheeling. Maria Christopher Plummer's acting,
Julie Andrews
at her absolute best, music of the kind that decades later is still perhaps evergreen. I think it'll be very hard to recreate a sound of music kind of movie. And when you do this tour and you actually see those locations where it was shot, including the I don't know what's it called, that bandstand kind of a thing where they sing that song, I am 16 going on 70. It's sort of it's hair raising for someone who likes the movie. Now, I would definitely encourage you, if you happen to be in that part of the world, to take the effort to take that tour.
Definitely. I was in Austria, but I didn't get to Salzburg. But I've seen The Sound of Music probably about 35, 40 times in my life. And I keep going back to it because it talks about positivity when she's coming in as a house kind, as a surrogate mother almost, as a guardian to the kids, and she faces challenges, and how she wins them over is amazing, because in life we face challenges, and we need to find solutions rather than finding them problematic. Several other governesses that come and left, whereas this Maria stayed on, and she finally became history, the Von Trapp family, that is. So I'm sorry if I'm going off on my own.
No, not at all. But it also reflects on talent that you meet. You have rainmakers who can really change your life. But then at the same time, how do you manage a problem like Maria? So how do you manage that talent? So if you actually see in your real life, in your day-to-day life, there are a lot of learnings, and there's a lot of parallels that you can draw both in your personal and professional life from classics like these.
Great. Why chess?
Well, it's something I've always enjoyed, and coincidentally, my son enjoys it as well. Both of us are, I would say, at best, reasonable players, not highly skilled. We haven't been trained, etc. And there's a healthy competition that goes on between us. And now, of course, with chess.com and so on, when you got free time, you can also play against another. I don't like playing against a computer. I mean, it just sounds a bit meaningless to me, but you can play against another competitor on that. So it's something that I've always enjoyed.
Yeah. So what do you like? Do you like the opening what kind of an opening do you normally do? I'm sorry, I play chess too.
Well, I'm not as much of an expert as you would, but if I'm not the one making the first move, I always figure out what the next person is doing and change and adapt to that. But usually it's the 2 steps ahead in front of the king, moving the pawn there, and that's the start. And then from there onwards, I try and make my own moves and not follow any standard.
Okay, what does chess teach you about real life?
Well, patience, the fact that you actually never lose a chess game until you've lost it in your mind, because you can be really down and still, find ways to come back. Patience, because and playing for the long run, because you can make some immediate sacrifices to strengthen your position for the longer run, and that takes a lot of courage to do. And I think that's what you need to do in the real life as well. Equally, many people find chess a very boring game because it's not like constant action happening. I find it very mentally stimulating, and that's what happens in life. Many people get bored with things that they're doing, but if you stick on and think it through and have a strategy that you're working towards, it actually works out well and puts you in a winning position.
There's a book I read by this guru, by this management chapter on guru. Uh, Fantastic book on chess. Maybe I'll share it with you. It's about a grandmaster teaching a not so very good or a talented player and making him the world champion. It's a wonderful book. If I'll share that with you at some stage. Now, coming back to, you've been quoted as saying that I love my work. People talk about Monday morning blues. I have Saturday morning blues. I keep waiting for it to be Monday because through the weekend, I would have thought of 20 more things I need to do. And I'm itching because I don't want to bother my other colleagues. So has the pandemic helped you get rid of your Saturday morning blues?
Well, it has in some ways, because now every day is a Saturday morning in that sense. What I'm very cautious of is the fact that you've got to respect other people's time. Because you're working from home does not mean that it's 24 by 7. Of course, your brain keeps working 24 by 7. I keep working very long hours, but that doesn't mean that my colleagues have to do that. So the Saturday morning blues now don't exist in that sense, because it's one long continuum. It's very hard for me to today even remember if it's a weekday or a weekend, etc., other than the fact that you have lesser calls perhaps on a weekend. But to the larger point, I just really do love my work. I find it extremely it's sometimes that if you have something that you're passionate about and you get paid for it, I think life can't be better than that. And I've always lived my life that way. I've also always had a sense of ownership, whether it was in Lintas, whether it's in Dan. I don't own a single share of either the Lintas company or the current company, but I just feel like I own it. It's my own, and I think that's really what gets me going. And I can't wait to do more things. I can't wait to sometimes very excitedly, the first thing, instead of before even greeting, I find somebody in the morning in the corridors, and I say, look, have you thought of this? Why don't we do this and all? And then I realize, no, I should have first sort of greeted the person, told them to. So I find it hard to control my enthusiasm towards work, and until I feel that way, I think I'm in a good place. I personally feel.
Yeah, but I think people who are self-starters and people who are self-motivated, people who are entrepreneurial, I think it never goes away.
Well, I hope so. I can't say about tomorrow, but I can tell you that I'm 55. I can tell you for the 55 years it hasn't gone away. I've now been in this industry for more than 32 years, and every day is more exciting to me. Every year has been better than the previous year. Every day has been more exciting than the previous say. And sometimes I think that if I have to relive life, I was very interested in law. I really love law. I've read a lot of law books. Perhaps an alternate career, if I hadn't done advertising, would have been law. And sometimes I wonder, that if I were to relive my life and restart what would I do? 9.9 out of 10 times I say, look, I think I'll do the same things that I've done. I'll probably marry the same wife who's been with me for more than 30 years now. Probably get into the same profession. This is the only profession that I've known. This is only my second job. I have a lovely family. And I think if I got a chance to relive life, I'd probably do the same things all over again, but this time with even more enthusiasm if I could.
But you wouldn't want to have your Bhasin and Company chambers? Like you said, you always love law also.
Well, it's a toss-up, but I think I would still go. I mean, advertising really has a as a high for me. I enjoy law. I read law, and these days, thanks to Netflix and Amazon Prime, so many of these serials, How to Get Away with Murder, and that Harvey Specter serial which I saw a couple of years ago, Suits. I mean, so it's really exciting. It's really interesting, but advertising is something else because
You should
every
also
day.
watch Perry Mason. You should also watch Perry Mason. It's on air.
I haven't watched it. Of course, I've read a lot of his books in my younger days. In fact, it used to be great on train journeys because you could almost finish a novel in one journey. So it used to be great, but haven't now for maybe 35 years read a Perry Mason.
It's come on air. The video version's coming. It's going to be coming on one of the streamers. And so you were saying about advertising. You were saying advertising?
Advertising is, there's something special about this profession. For one, no 2 days, I would say no 2 hours are the same. You think after 32 years you've seen it all, you've sort of seen anything, and you can tackle it, and every morning it surprises you and teaches you how little you know and how much more you have to see and learn. It's also a relatively young profession. You're always trying different things, and one amazing thing about this profession is that very early on in your life you get a lot of responsibility. If you've won your client's trust at a relatively young age with lesser experience, you are entrusted with their most valuable asset, which is their brand. And sometimes hundreds of crores of rupees of advertising, but more importantly, a brand which is worth millions or billions is entrusted to you. Also, the other bit about advertising is that you're not doing, I don't think I would have been able to do a single job which pertain to a single type of a thing for 32 years or so. I would never have been able to do it. The thing about advertising is that every day it allows you to do something different. If you look at advertising today, I mean, look at the digital world, look at search and performance, look at all. This didn't even exist when we had started off in our careers, right? So,
Yes.
and this is when you're seeing it on a continuum of 30 years. But even if you see it in a continuum of 30 days, every day there is something new. Every day there's some, new interaction. And the other bit is I love interacting with people. I love sort of, having a good intellectual joust with them, mixing around with them, getting ideas going, inspiring people, getting inspired by people. And I think this is one profession which allows you to do so with complete independence and freedom with all types of people. I mean, you don't really need a qualification in that sense to be in advertising, right? By education, I did my BSc honors in biochemistry and zoology, and then my MBA in marketing. Now, of course, I have been conferred an honorary PhD for my contribution to media and advertising. So, education-wise, what I did had nothing to do with. I mean, a biochemist and a zoologist doing advertising. So you find doctors, you find engineers, you find people who've dropped out of school and college and formal education, but are so bright and so smart. So I think just the sheer variety of people that you get to work with and the joy and enthusiasm that they bring in, that keeps me going. And something that most people don't see it as, but that's what I've always seen it as, it's a great business. You've got to run it as a business. And I think one of the things that is perhaps wrong with our profession is that we value great creative talent as we should, we value great planning talent as we should, great digital talent as we should. We don't attach significant value to great business expertise in advertising. And there are very, very few people you can look up to and learn from also in that, because somehow we got ourselves into this mode. This is not a business, this is more than that, in that sense. Yes, it is more than that, but at the end of the day, it is a business. And if you don't run it as a business, very soon you'll be out of business. And there are hundreds of examples that you can see around this. So I just feel that that's an area which enthuses me a lot, and hopefully many more people will start looking upon this as a serious business, particularly in times like these of COVID, which are bringing in new challenges, and particularly in times of disruption which digital is doing to our industry.
I'll come to that. So, who are your role models in terms of,
Well, I've learned a lot from, I've been lucky that in my early years, I've learned a lot from some very bright people. I mean, Alec Badamsi was my CEO. He wasn't my boss, but was my super boss in that sense. And I think I was very inspired by him, and I got to work with him closely. That was great. I've worked very closely with Prem Mehta, who was the chairman of Lintas for many years, and I learned a lot of business, human and how to treat human beings and how to handle people, and a lot of business stuff from him. I think there have been successful businessmen, not too many in advertising. Martin Sorrell, I would think, is an example of that. So these are all people you learn from them. You see what they're doing, a lot of it, and then you of course adapt it to your own style, because everybody's circumstances, everybody's strengths and weaknesses are different. So I think that's the kind of I draw from people in that sense.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I used to deal with Ravi Gupta, Trikaya. I thought he was amazing. I thought he was a amazing mind, Trikaya Gray, if you go back in time. And he was very, very business oriented and very media focused. So
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know if you ever got a
he
chance
was.
to work with him.
I didn't get to work directly with him. I interacted with him a bit in the industry bodies. He was, of course, much senior and much older, but he was a very impressive person as well. But by and large, in this area of inspiring as advertising businessmen, I think the examples have been few and far between, at least in the Indian landscape.
Great. I mean, so, you seem to be becoming a Bajan Daruwala, Lord Ganesha, or Nostradamus. You
I'm
were quoted in
I'm not that
2020.
fat. I'm not that fat. I've been
Well,
working on
just let me finish. Let me finish. You were quoted in 2020 as saying, I do believe that by 2020, my company believes that as well. By 2020 or 2021, 100% of the businesses will be impacted by digital. There will not be any business that will not be impacted by digital. That does not mean other media won't be there. TV will be strong and growing. Print will be strong and growing slowly, perhaps. But there is no business that is not going to be impacted by digital. Did you expect your soothsaying to come together in such a drastic way that it has in 2020 with the
No, I don't
pandemic?
think
Yeah.
I don't think anybody expected the pandemic to happen, and therefore force ourselves to be at home and therefore work on digital. And actually, the pandemic has been perhaps the biggest digital transformation agent. Today you have grandparents so comfortably doing Zoom calls with their grandchildren.
Yeah.
We would have probably got there in any case, because that's what I believed, and that's what I meant with that. We'd have probably anyway got there the way things were going, but it would have probably taken us 5 years. This has done it in 5 months. But the writing on the wall for which way the consumer is heading, in our business, to see where your business is going, you have to see which way is the consumer going. Both, and by the consumer I mean the end consumer, not necessarily your client, because your client will also finally go in the same direction as the consumer is going. Otherwise he or she will be out of business in any case, right? So if you saw the consumer, it was very clear to me, particularly to the with the younger generation, that the adoption of digital was going to be much faster than what most of our competitors were anticipating. In fact, I built my business in India on that premise, and that turned out to be very beneficial for us as a business. You don't, many a time in life, you don't have to over rely on research. You just have to see for yourself and get a clear sense. And once you're absolutely sure that, look, this is happening, this is a trend, then you have to have the guts to back that, put your money where your mouth is. It's very easy to say this in hindsight, but it was very difficult to do so in 2008, 2009, when we started our digital journey, because at that time, remember, the market was only 3-4% digital, right? Versus last year where it was 20%, and this year perhaps it'll be 30%.
Sure. So, in your opinion, is being optimistic good when the reality is saying something else, or it's better to be a realist?
Look, by definition, a leader has to be optimist. You have to be optimistic, and you have to inspire your people. Tomorrow will always be better than today if you put in all your right efforts. But that is optimism and enthusiasm that you bring into your organization. However, you don't plan on the most optimistic scenario. You plan for the realistic case, perhaps with a tinge of being on a worst case. You plan for that, but you hope that you get optimistic results, right? The problem I think many businesses are facing, particularly in the advertising sector and media sector in India, they're planning based on optimism, and then when the optimistic scenario doesn't happen, or if something disruptive happens, then they're running around like headless chicken. They just don't know how to cope with it, right? And then they start blaming either the environment or the government or the system or the pandemic or whatever else that you find reasons. So I think the sensible way to approach business in advertising is you plan for the realistic case, perhaps with a little bit of conservatism built in, but hope for and have an ambition for the best case, for the optimistic case, and then be ready to pivot upwards or downwards. Agility is going to be key. There was a time when you used to do 3-year plans and 5-year plans. I think that's nonsense. You need to have a general direction. And yes, that should be for 3 to 5 years where you're going, where you're heading. But actually, today, you can't plan for 3 months, forget about 3 years. I bet you in any organization, you don't know, I don't know what's going to happen in a month from now or 2 months from now. Forget about what's going to happen in 3 years from now. So while you do a lot of those Excel sheet filling exercises and PowerPoints about, here's my 3-year trajectory and this is how it's going to go to the last decimal point. In reality, I see those as directions. I see those as a course that I want to chart, but I would like planning to be a lot more agile and a lot more responsive to immediate needs. So I think that getting that balance right between optimism and realism in terms of planning and ambition, separating the two, I think that is crucial and critical.
Well said. I've been getting mixed messaging. Some are happy with the way the markets and consumers are responding to the opening up and unlocking, that we are seeing currently. But GDP numbers for the first quarter are negative 23+%, and it's down to its lowest in recordable history. Hence, others are beating their chests and wailing and crying, saying that the year ahead is going to get tougher, despite the optimism that we are trying to infuse, and saying that we are recovering. Your comments?
Look, first of all, accept the reality. In the last 2 generations, perhaps, we haven't seen an event like this. This is sort of stuff your grandfather or your father would tell you stories about, where life was in danger, food was in shortage, everything was disrupted, war days and all of that. The last 2 generations of managers have never seen this, haven't experienced this. So I'm not surprised that they have no clue how to handle it, right? They haven't geared themselves up for it because we have very cookie cutter type of management styles. Everybody just knows how to do incrementally better than what was previous. And when disruption happens, they just don't know how to cope with it. First, accept the reality. From an advertising industry's point of view, beginning of the year, most of us, all of us, in fact, all the big agency groups had predicted a growth of between 10 to 12%. That was a consensus kind of a range. Yeah. I remember my group had said 10.9%, somebody had said 11, 12%, etc. Right? So that was roughly the range. The reality is that we're going to end the year most likely minus 15 to 20%. So there's something like a 30% swing between where you were expecting to be and where you're going to land up, right? That 30% translates to something like 23,000 crores. So 20 to 23,000 crores are going to go away from the industry. Some parts will be more severely impacted. For example, events, which are totally disrupted, out of home, which at least for now is completely disrupted. Some like digital will be relatively less impacted. But when 23,000 crores goes away from an industry like ours, of our size, it is going to disrupt and cause a problem with anybody. So first, take that as a reality, accept it. There's no point in hoping and wishing, no, suddenly a magic wand will be waved, one V-shaped recovery will happen and everything will come back. That's not going to happen. Now, okay, this is the new level at which the businesses are going to operate. Now figure out that, do you have the right structure? Do you have the right people? Do you have the right cost base to service this kind of level on that? Or are you over on it, or are you under on it, or do you have the wrong type of resources to handle it, etc.? And then plan accordingly. This is not the time to be adventurous. This is the time to conserve your cash, conserve your resources, because I don't believe everything is going to suddenly get better. At the same time, India, particularly the way we are structured, things will keep improving month on month. So I think every month, so if you see April, we had hit the bottom. May was slightly better because the second half of May opened up. So May was slightly better than April. June was better than May. July is going to was a little better than June. August, hopefully, I don't have the numbers yet, will be probably a little better than July. So it'll be that small, we came down with a thud. We now have to creep up an inch at a time, right? So I think get the reality right and have the ambition to grow, but also be grounded in the realism that your cheese has moved and therefore you're going to take a hit in many areas, and therefore adapt yourselves to that.
No, am I being pessimistic? I thought August was recovering, but until 10 days ago or 13 days ago, when the market started sliding back again in terms of the consumer sentiment. Correct me if I'm wrong. Am I being too sensitive and too pessimistic?
So I think you are, because I don't think you should see short-term trends. The fact is that the market is disrupted, right? People have lost their jobs. Now, when the bank moratoriums are lifted, there'll be a lot of people who are not going to be able to pay back their EMIs and their motorbikes and their cars, etc. Whatever will they be able to pay those loans? So those kind of concerns will come up. We haven't seen the end of job loss. Businesses have tried to absorb costs as much as they can. Now, as you can see, even from the earnings that are coming in the stock exchanges, they're now going to be under pressure, and therefore this thing will continue for a while. But on the positive side, there are a lot of good things. I mean, we've had perhaps the best rains we've had in a long, long time. It's not just the quantum of the rain, which is about 8-9% ahead, but it's also best spread rains that we've had in maybe 40-50 years. The the crops have been good. The sowing for the previous harvest was good. The sowing for the current crop is about 9% more in acreage, which is huge on that. So what that means is that hopefully the rural economy will do well. Now, on a GDP basis, that accounts only for about 16% of our GDP, but almost 50 to 60% of people are impacted by agricultural earnings, rural earnings, etc. So there'll be more money in the hands of 50-60% of the population, which means it won't only translate into more tractor sales, etc., but it'll also which incidentally, Mahindra and Mahindra tractors has just given their results, has been a record period for them. But it'll also translate into more soaps being bought, more toothpaste being bought, more motorbikes being bought, and so on and so forth. So there is no reason to be despondent on that at all. And largely, our economy is in the right place. There has been a temporary setback, but it will take time to come back. So there is no reason for euphoria either. I think you have to have a balanced view, but I don't think we should be despondent or overly pessimistic. I think every month will be better than the previous month, and until we come back to normality.
So August was, I thought till the 13th or 14th, it was doing well, 15th. Then I think from the 19th, it started going down again. The sentiment, from what I'm understanding, people are going into shops, but they're not buying. They're coming out, or they're not going into shops. And in the recent opening up, the malls have not been really seeing too many footfalls. So while I understand what you're saying about the rural economy, but as you said, it's 16-17%. And I hope the farmers get the grains which come out do not rot like they've done in the past, where inefficient logistics and supply chains have resulted in huge losses for different organizations and for the farmers also. So what I'm saying is that you're seeing August, you don't have the numbers, so you can't really validate whether it's good, because the feedback I'm getting is that Onam was muted compared to forget previous years. I mean, last year was a flood, the floods were there, and year before last, the floods were there in Kerala. But the big lighthouse, it's like a lighthouse which says what's going to happen in the coming months. Onam was muted. Certain parts were locked down and consumers went out, but they didn't spend enough. They came in and they didn't spend enough. I read somewhere that 25% of what they expected is what they had.
But I mean, that is expected, right? As a consumer, I mean, how much ever money you might have, you're always going to be cautious. If you're worried about, will I have a job? Will my earning, or if you're a small businessman, will I have my earnings? Everybody's earnings have been impacted. So there is going to be that level of cautiousness. Also, there could be second waves. There could be, one of the things that has been impacting is these small localized lockdowns that's been disrupting both the supply chains as well as the consumers who might want to go out. So there will be these phases. It's not going to be one smooth, clear ride up. And in fact, one thing I'm pretty sure it's not going to be is a sharp V-shaped recovery with a magic wand. Everything is now back to Diwali time. Everything is good. That's not going to happen. So you will have your bumpy road. You will have ups and downs. But by and large, I do believe that we kind of hit the bottom point somewhere in April, May. And from here, trend-wise, we will only start going up. But it will be a gradual up, and it'll take a long time. I feel we've lost 2 to 2.5 years. I don't think even 2021 will be the same in numbers as 2019 for the advertising industry. I think it'll probably be somewhere in 2022 that we will reach the 2019 numbers. So in many ways, you've lost 2.5 years because of this COVID. And that's a reality. You got to face it, and you got to engineer your business with that reality. No point in hoping and wishing, I wish this hadn't happened, or I wish it suddenly comes back to normal. Plan for the reality. And the reality is we've lost 2.5 years in my view.
Yeah, but certain media groups have given guidance that they're actually going to hit back to where they've seen drops of 70%. They're going to go get back to 2019 levels as of this year. Is that too optimistic? And these are leading media groups.
There'll be winners and losers, and some will do better and some will do worse. So I'm sure if they've given the guidance, I'm sure they're seeing the signs. But look at, on the other hand, if you look at the advertising industry, I mean, print as a sector is completely disrupted. They weren't even able to have distribution. Even if it comes back, maybe it'll be okay for the regional languages, but I don't think in a hurry English print is going to come back. So that's a huge chunk just taken away from the industry, right? Look at the events and experiential industry. It's gone to zero, literally zero, right? It's just collapsed on that. So that's a huge chunk gone out. Look at outdoor, 7 months, 6-7 months have been a virtual washout. So there have been big hits. Now, of course, there will be some which will be digital, probably is still going to grow. Even in a year like this will still grow. But, the Dan Digital report had expected about 27% growth in digital. I think it'll probably come down to 5 or 7% at best, but it'll still grow. TV, on the other hand, is showing signs of recovery, but I don't think 2020 is going to be as good as 2019 for the industry at large. Maybe some individual players, perhaps they are, but I feel overall we'll end the year, like I said, overall at a 15 to 20% negative.
Okay, I'm going to go back to what you said, that customers are being cautious. So, do we see that caution? I mean, I know you said customers are being cautious. So if they're not buying, then how will offtake of product take place going forward?
Look, Anil, one thing you have to remember that unlike any other market, India is most driven by sentiment. If your sentiment is good. So last year, for example, there was no COVID. The economy wasn't doing that badly. I mean, it was growing, a slowdown had started, but still the customer sentiment was down, right? We are very sentiment driven. Now, you need some game changers. You need some trigger points for these to happen. You need elation to come in. Festive season does have the potential if things start, let's say, cooling down, a vaccine is discovered, or COVID cases have significantly fallen.
But that's not happening. That's not happening. None of this is happening really, apart from the crop, the rains and the crops being buoyant.
What I'm saying is that you need some triggers to bring you a positivity. To an extent, I see IPL doing that. It sort of elates the mood in some ways. I think the big trigger is going to be a great harvest with great money in the hands of 50-60% of the countrymen and countrywomen, and then starting the consumption cycle. I think the revival will actually be led by rural tier 4, tier 3 towns rather than by big cities in that sense. But it's not going to be an euphoric bounce back. We do need a sentiment change. And if I were the government, the one thing I would be looking at is to see how can I bring the feel good factor back for people? Because even if you have the money today, all of us, if you think of yourself as a consumer, you will hesitate. Either you won't be in the mood for it, or you'll be cautious, particularly on larger purchases. You'll say, why don't I wait it out? And until everything doesn't start opening up fully, this, half opening up, going back, half opening up, is not working very well. Because until it doesn't open up fully, you can't, even the consumer is not committing fully to that. So I think we're going through this phase, but hopefully in another 4 to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, they do say that by somewhere in October or so, we should peak in COVID. I don't know. I'm not an expert. But if that does happen, and if the festive season does come in, maybe we will start seeing a little more consumers being a little more freer with their spending.
Yeah. So now there is some commentators and some media agency heads have said that we need to look at a push strategy rather than a pull strategy. So how do you think that will work?
I think it's I don't think it's something very sensible. It's a bit like a lot of some of the people were advising their clients even during lockdown that you should keep spending the money. Your brand shouldn't disappear from the consumer's mind, etc. In theory, of course, that's absolutely right. If you were writing a textbook, that's exactly what you would say. But if I'm a client, I also want to conserve my money, right? Liquidity is short for everybody. My sales have stopped. My shops are closed. Customers not even able to, customer, it's a supply shock rather than a demand shock. The demand is still there. The customer is not allowed to go out to the shop to buy it and the shop is closed. What's the point in my advertising beyond a point, right? So I think there are a lot of theories being said. We do need to revive demand. Advertising plays a good role in reviving the demand. But I think generally everybody now has to be sensible. The time for excesses is over. This is not the period for excesses. And when you have lesser resources, the clients have lesser resources, the consumers have lesser resources, the agencies, the media owners, everybody has lesser resources. When you have lesser resources, I think your focus has to be, how do you make your money work harder, right? How do you make it more efficient? How do you get a bigger bang out of your buck? Once that happens and once the demand starts coming back, you can then become a lot more adventurous. So all this push strategy and all is great. It's the right direction that we should take, but it may not be the best advice to give to every client that don't pay your salaries, your factories are shutting down, but just put tons and tons of money on advertising so that consumer demand starts. It may work very well in some sectors, but I would advise everybody, even though it may not be in my best interest, that client or every keep a balanced view. Being out of the consumer's mind is disastrous at times like these. Equally, I'd rather that you spend as much as you can pay and afford, rather than spend disproportionately and then permanently hamper your business. It'll obviously depend on company to company, but in general, most businesses are going to be starved for cash, and I think that's where you have to conserve your money and also spend it more wisely.
What I'm hearing is that there's a cash flow issue happening in the whole economy currently, because
Yes, there is a liquidity problem, and partly liquidity problem because there has been no inflows or much reduced inflows for people. Jobs have been lost, so they don't have money on an individual level, and businesses offtake has fallen, and they need money. We think that you can do a lockdown and then next day open the lockdown and by a switch everything goes in. It doesn't work that way. By the time labor goes back to the cities, to their villages, by the time they come back, production starts, sales start, shops open. It's a long process. And in that process also, it's not going to be one smooth ride. There will be ups and downs, there'll be bumps, there'll be, some more cases spurting up somewhere else. There'll be, in a large country like us, 100 things happen. We also have geopolitical tensions on our head. In the midst of all of this, we are eyeball to eyeball with China, which is, a country larger than us in terms of population and a very powerful military bit. So we're not
also much more powerful economically.
Much more powerful economically. So we're not a simple, straightforward country with a 10, 20 lakh, 50 lakh population that which is all homogeneous and very contained. We have floods happening at the same time as pestilence is happening, at the same time geopolitical issues are happening. At times like these, you have to make sure that you're spending your money wisely. And I think a good agency will be who's a good partner to his or her client, will be one which is making sure that that he's encouraging their clients to spend the money, but in a very sensible and in a very effective manner. And I think that has to, from a long-term partnership point of view, I think that has to be the view everybody has to take. But clients must spend money to revive demand, because if they don't, they will go into a negative spiral. If you're not going to spend, there will be no demand. If you're not going to have the demand, you'll start cutting your costs, your manpower, your production, and then you're in a negative spiral. And the only way out of this is to spur demand, but in a sensible manner.
Sure. So are we seeing, you've got a broad roster of clients, 25 agencies, how many is it, or 24? I keep forgetting.
Yeah, we have 23, 24. Well, essentially we have one agency in that sense, but we have 23 different businesses.
Yeah. Okay. So, across these, which of the clients are seeing some green shoots in terms of demand? And what are they telling you, the ones who are seeing demand, and what are you telling them? And the ones who are not seeing demand, what are they telling you and what are you telling them?
So I think there are 2 or 3 types of clients. So for example, if you look at the some of the FMCG clients, they were relatively least impacted even in the lockdown, right? Because they came under essential commodities. If you have cleaning products or if you have food products, etc. So they are in a different. There, it is about consistency and making sure again that they. It's also a bit of supply and demand, because geographically supply was disrupted in many parts, etc. The one sector which I think is going to see revival, and you can already see signs of it, is automobiles. Last year, nothing to do with COVID, but last year was a bad year for automobiles in India, if you remember. Automobiles are a
Yeah.
very large sector, even for the economy, for GDP. I can see signs of revival happening there. Partly it could be because people may prefer personal conveyance to public conveyance because of COVID. Also, it could be pent up demand. It could also be, like I said, rural economies doing better, kind of driving it. But I clearly see automobiles as a sector that's going to do well. There's some sectors obviously that are going to be challenged for a long time to come. I think aviation, hotels and hospitality are the obvious ones, but even things like real estate, non-digital education. So while you'll have your Baijus of the world and the upgrads of the world probably doing much better, you'll equally have, let's say in the past you would have 1 year Amity University or Punjab Lovely University or whatever, those kinds. I think those are going to be challenged. Real estate, of course, will probably find it difficult. So it's going to be a mixed bag. Entertainment, I think the OTTs, for example, are doing well, obviously, because of a lot of consumption and therefore they would be advertising. But on the other hand, cinema halls are still shut, and that's a large part of the entertainment business. So there'll be not every sector and not every type of client will have a uniform comeback. It'll be sort of mixed depending upon the category.
What are they telling you now? We have the festive season coming up. We've got the IPL coming up. What are your clients telling you? I mean, do
I think
we?
by and large,
What are you telling them?
the clients who aren't totally disrupted are planning to increase their spends in this period. They're also hoping that now that the supply chains are a little more settled, etc., they're also hoping that things will their stockists will are opening up, that demand will start picking up, and most of them are waiting cautiously, I would say. So there is a little bit of a cautious optimism. Optimism is probably a wrong word, but a little bit of a cautious uptick that you can notice in the sentiment. Like I said, it's very sentiment driven. Now, on the other hand, let's say IPL gets things going, festive season is better, demand is suddenly picking up. This can change almost overnight. People can then start, getting the confidence to spend. So clients are getting plans ready for the festive season, maybe a little muted compared to the past, but still reasonably okay. But they haven't yet pressed the full button that, okay, go ahead and spend it. So there is that element of caution and wait and watch that's prevailing.
Yeah. So, what is the pandemic and the unlocking done to the culture of your agency and your agencies? Has it changed for better, for good?
Look, culture is not something that changes overnight, but definitely the way of working has changed quite drastically. I mean, who would have thought? If you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have laughed at you saying that all 3,500 people are going to work from home and work will still more or less go on that bit. I couldn't have imagined it. You couldn't have imagined it. None of us could have imagined it, right? But human beings are very adaptive on that. Of course, we had a little bit of an advantage because I look after APAC and China was hit earlier, right? So by Chinese New Year, but towards the end of Jan, we'd already seen that they were moving to work from home. So our BCP processes and our IT gearing up. I always say, the unsung heroes in this period actually have been the IT guys. Without them, my whole organization at least would have been paralyzed, and I'm sure this is true for most organizations. And we pivoted very quickly, and very successfully into work from home. Having done this and having seen it succeed over a longer period of time, I think every company, every individual is rethinking whether you need to have large, big offices with everybody spending 2 hours a day commuting, coming in 5 days a week for 8 or 10 hours a week, or is there a new model that is possible? And I think newer models will develop. At the same time, I think it's also, it's very hard to. Our business depends on communicating with each other as well. As human beings, we are very social. It's very easy. A lot of business actually happens, or business related issues happen around the coffee machine or around the water cooler. And, I feel more businesses transacted between people going together for a smoke break than a formal PowerPoint presentation. Now that's lost. So you have to find virtual ways of trying to get that back. So I think some things will be permanent, some things may not be permanent, but it will definitely lead to changed behavior. I wouldn't say changed culture, because I would like to believe culture is deeper than that. But yes, culture also eventually behavior does impact culture. So even culture would have some change in that sense.
What kind of changes do you expect to come in? I mean, is it, uh, will we start getting a little more inward as we have been locked up in our homes and while we've been doing digital communication, etc.?
I think there's going to be a lot of fear initially, even when the opening up happens. Let's say tomorrow morning the government says 100% of the people can come into your offices.
Mhm.
I still feel probably a lot of people will be, and companies can reassure that we are doing sanitization, we are doing whatever, all the precautions that you're supposed to take. But I think there will still be fear in people's mind, and
Mhm.
I think that's got to be, it's a hurdle that we have to overcome. Expectations of clients from agencies also have changed. I don't think clients expected that agencies would be able to service them to this much of an extent, and therefore I think that there'll be a bit of a change in relationship over there as well. I think pricing will change. I think the way we pitch clients, I mean, there've been pitches happening virtually. Who would have ever thought of that? That you've never met a client and you're talking about hundreds of crores of business, and that process is all done virtually. So I think there's definitely going to be a change of relationship, but it will settle down at some phase. As human beings, our memory sometimes is shorter than what we think it is. So I just hope that all the good that we've learned out of it stays with us, and a lot of habits which we thought, which we've now realized we didn't need to have, which we've let go. I hope we can continue doing that. I just hope that we don't get back into business as usual if usual ever happens in that sense.
Yeah. So what are the learnings are taking out of this, out of the pandemic and the
Well,
lockdown?
Well, for one thing is that your business has to be agile. That's the single biggest learning. You have a plan, you have a very well thought out strategy. I'll do this in this month, that in that month, all fully planned in. But life doesn't go according to your plan. So you need to have the agility to move faster, right? Also, this will in some ways impact talent. So far in I think, by the way, the biggest problem our industry has, and if there's one thing we should be losing sleep over, is talent. Because
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that the quality of people coming in to advertising, at least in India, but perhaps globally, is worse than the quality of people going out. Right. And there was a time when we would be day one company, for example, in an IIM. Today, any advertising agency would find it very hard to be a day one company, or any significant recruiter in IIM, because of our pay structures, because of the relative importance of our industry going down, etc. So I think talent is a huge problem. If we and that's also causing a problem on pricing, because when you have lower capabilities, you're not able to demonstrate enough value, and therefore we crib that our margins are lower. Our margins are lower because the perceived value that we are adding to the business in the client's mind is lower, right? And one way in our people's business to make that go up is to have better people.
Yeah.
Correct. I pride myself in being one of the most profitable agencies, and certainly not one of the cheapest agencies, right? Because I mean, if you're giving a good product, then you gotta have to pay for that good product, right? But so one thing that this will change is that now geography will be history. It doesn't matter whether the talent is sitting in Manchester or Manipal, because we've got used to this remote working. In most cases, I mean, obviously it's not a this thing, we'll probably be able to pick the best talent from across the globe or across the country. And not at the moment, if you wanted somebody in Bombay, by and large you would recruit somebody from Bombay. If you wanted somebody in Delhi, you would recruit somebody from Delhi, and that was your catchment area. Because we as an industry have not concentrated on growing the talent pool. Our whole focus, all of us are responsible for that, me more than anybody else. Our whole focus has been of how do you poach, I'll pay 10% more, take your guy, you'll pay 15% more, take my guy. So there's this musical chairs that has been played with talent, but the expansion of making the industry more attractive to great talent, I think we failed as an industry, or we haven't done enough as an industry in that area. This pandemic has the potential of altering that, particularly because digital is becoming so important and will be a larger part, and the digital economy is more of a gig economy.
Okay. So we see an agency where you could pick up a retired creative director of some agency globally and you could get him to work for you or a
Why not?
copywriter.
Why not? Or some great tech talent who's sitting in California, who you otherwise would never have been able to afford and may not want to come back, but may do a project for you today, etc., etc. Right? So there are 1,000 options that if the best artist in a particular area is sitting in Manila, or a best musician is sitting in Bangkok, you're no longer the geography is no longer constraining you, right? So if you are adventurous and you start thinking, and if you're agile, and that's why I feel there's going to be a premiumness on agility in the new era. All those, monolithic old world holding companies who've been there for 100 years, moving in a certain way, even now they are not seeing that the times have changed, and so on. I think they're going to be in for a rude shock. You can see the share prices of all holding companies globally. Forget this pandemic. If you see the last 2 years, the share markets have gone up, right? But the shares of all holding companies have gone down, some lesser than the others, some more than the others, etc. But they've all gone down, which only means that the market doesn't think that we as an industry have adapted to the newer times as well as we should have, and therefore our potential for growth in future is lesser, right? So that's the best indication. The market is the best barometer often in these things. We should see that as a writing on the wall, and attach a huge premium to both agility and to future proofing.
So in terms of you were referring to the advertising sector companies which are listed specifically, right? Or you're
Yes.
talking about
I'm talking about the advertising holding companies, WPP, IPG, Publicis, Omnicom, Dentsu, etc. I'm talking about these big holding companies, the 5 or 6 of the big holding companies. You track their performance, and you track the indices in their markets on that. Almost always you'll note, in all, not almost, in all the cases, you'll notice that they have underperformed the indices.
Wow. Okay. I'll get back to you and Dan now. So there's a joke that does the rounds in ad circles. You don't ask what Ashish had for breakfast when you meet him. You ask him which agency or company has gobbled up this morning. Any comments?
Well, we are proud to be the first port of call for smart, industrious, future-looking businessmen. So therefore, I suppose this comment is coming from the fact that a lot of it was a part of my strategy that a lot of our growth was going to be inorganic, and there was a reason for that. So I'm very, if that's what you're referring to, then I'm very happy to have that positioning. We continue to be the first port of call and the first choice for any good entrepreneur to partner with. That is true.
Great. But why have such an assemblage of such a wide network of agencies?
Look,
How is it with you?
there is a reason for that. So, and the reason is in history. Right? I was coming in 2008 as Aegis Media. At that time, it was Aegis Media. It wasn't yet Dentsu. And I was 85 years late compared to my competitors. WPP, I think, what was then Hindustan Thompson Associates came in 1928, if I'm not mistaken. Lintas, I remember, came around 1930s or so. WPP, IPG, etc., had been here 80, 90 years before I had, right? And they had huge operations, and several of our other competitors. So therefore, I had to do something which was different, right? So, and there are 2 or 3 things that we did differently. One of the things that we did differently was, like I said before, actually, I went for one of these seminars, and one of our competitors was talking about the fact that digital is only 3-4% of the market. And I said, look, that's my biggest opportunity. These guys were making tons and tons of money over the years on TV, print, etc. for so long. So therefore, they weren't looking at digital at that stage. And I said, now's the time that the world is going to move digital. That was a call I took, a punt I took in 2008, 2009. So therefore, why don't I invest in these areas? Now, when I'm doing that, but I was very clear that if I was getting into these areas, I had to be the best and biggest in those. So if it was search and performance, I must have the best and biggest search and performance agency. If it was social media, likewise, right? The best in that bit. Now, if I were to build that, I could, but it would take me 10 years to. The very first acquisition I did was of Communicate2, which was the largest search and performance company, Vivek Bhargav's. To build another Communicate2 would have taken me 10 years, because that's what it probably took Vivek to build it on that, or maybe 5 years at least to do so, right? I said, look, here's an opportunity. I can leapfrog this, and through acquisitions do that. And in a very strategic way, I brought in companies in areas where I thought my clients were going to have needs in days, months, and years to come. And then, of course, the challenge was, how do you integrate them? How do you make them work well together? So that was the strategy, and I continue to have that strategy. I would like, in an ideal, of course, just now is a COVID period, so it's a very different time. But I would like to have a strategy where half my growth comes organically and half of it continues to come inorganically. Because one thing that people forget is that acquisitions bring in great fresh blood and great talent into a company. There was no way I could have got, or many of those people who are now a part of my company would have been a part of my company if I only offered them a job. They wouldn't come. I mean, for example, if I were to want to hire you, you will never come to work as an employee, right? If you're a great talent. But if I were to partner you through an acquisition or through something, it's not just the money or the balance sheet or whatever. I also get great talent, right? And I was starting from scratch and I needed great talent. And we were able to put together an environment where this talent grew and thrived and integrate them. And you know what's amazing about it is, look at the, I mean, we spoke about Vivek. Look at that, his track record. He's running today a business which is far bigger than what he was running as Dan CEO. He's finished his earnout. He's many years ago, but he still continues to work. Obviously, it's not for the salary. He's had his earnout. He's had all the money come in, etc. It's because people forget that for an entrepreneur, the company is more than the money. It's their baby, it's their life, it's something that they have built. If you give them the independence, the respect, and the ability to run their company the way they should, and give them an infrastructure in which they can scale it up, and give them and house them in that manner, why would they ever want to leave it? I am not in favor of the kind of acquisitions which some of our competitors do. The first thing they do is they take the guy in, they try to throw out or create conditions for the owner to leave. They change the brand name and they make it, part of a big machine. Then why buy it? Then the reason you are buying that company, or you're partnering with that company, is because they have something that you don't. And most often, that's not the balance sheet. That's not even the client base. That's the people. Because in our business, it's the people who build the business. The clients came because of these people. The balance sheet got built because of these people. And I think somewhere in that process, we managed to land this right. We got a good mix between organically growing media companies, some of our out of home companies, and we were ahead of the curve, I would say. Not all calls go great, but we were ahead of the curve in bringing in areas which turned out to be high growth areas, and then getting them to work together as one family. So, advertising attrition rates are very, very high, as you know. Even we have pretty high attrition, particularly in digital at the lower and middle levels in a normal year, not in a year like this. But if you look at our senior people on that, they're, like you said, 23 companies, 24 companies. So there are 24 very senior people, CEOs, etc. on that. In the last 12 years since we started, there has been zero attrition. Not one person has left in that bit. And I think that's the compliment to my team. That's the team that we built. That's the culture that we built. Because it's not my business. It's all their business. It's all of our business, and we work together. And I hope Anand, who's my successor, who's worked closely with me for so many years in India, will be able to carry it to even higher heights.
Great. I mean, so in all this, you had your Japanese principles standing behind you strong. So Aegis, if I remember, Aegis was a UK company, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And you had the Japanese culture, which is the Japanese agencies are very much integrated in the media sector in Japan. So you had the support of your Japanese principles all along.
So, I was from the Aegis side of the business, right? So, and then a few years after I started Aegis Media in India, then Dentsu took over Aegis Media globally. And then we had the challenge of bringing a Dentsu and an Aegis structure. Both of them were, at that time, I remember, about 600-700 people. So both were pretty scaled up operations. How do you bring them together? And obviously coming from two very different cultures, but with a lot of complementarity, right? So there was a big challenge of how do you bring them together and integrate it? And I think we went about it pretty systematically, and frankly, after a year or so's time, it didn't matter whether you were from the Dentsu side or the Aegis side. We were all Dentsu Aegis network, and we were all working in one direction. Aegis and Dentsu both gave me a lot of put a lot of confidence and trust in me, and gave me a listen to me, and gave me a reasonably free hand to ensure that I was building the business according to my vision and the way that I wanted to. But having said that, this is true for all holding companies and all multinational companies. Uh, you have to deliver to what you commit that you will do, right? They're obviously pretty, all holding companies are quite results driven in that sense. So you have to earn the trust, and that trust is earned by consistently delivering what you say that you're going to be delivering. And we were very lucky that not a single year up to 2019, I can say. This year, of course, is different because we've recast our budgets globally as well as here. We've not sort of, the business has been disrupted in every market. But up to 2019, for 12 years, there was not a single year where we didn't have double-digit growth every year, and not a single year where we didn't meet the numbers that we said we would meet. And when you consistently do that, then people trust you, and because they know that you're doing it. And like I said right in the beginning, I've always run my job thinking as if it's my own company and I own it. And I think that's the best way to be in a company. And I would like to inculcate that, and I think we've managed to inculcate that. So for example, if Harish is running Postoscope, I want him to feel that he owns Postoscope. If Divya is running Dentsu X, I want her to feel she's running Dentsu X. If Rubina is running iProspect, she must feel she owns iProspect, because that's the only way you will take decisions in the best interest of the company, and that's the only way a company can grow.
But that's Anand's responsibility now, right? Running the India business. In the meanwhile, they recognized that you were doing a good job as far as India was concerned. They kicked you upstairs to look after a larger territory.
I don't know if kicked is the right word, but yes.
It's meant in the right tonality, not in the wrong one.
But yes, so I was running South and Southeast Asia, which is basically Southeast Asia and India. I was running that. And then an opportunity, as you may have read, we were having a lot of tumult in APAC, in the region, and two of our largest markets, the number one and number two market, which is China and Australia, were both challenged, and indeed Singapore, which is our headquarters for the region. So these three markets were pretty challenged, and because of that, the region was undergoing a very difficult period. In a period of less than a year, I was the third APAC CEO in that sense. So we had rapid change of personnel. There were a lot of people we had to let go at senior levels because they weren't seeing the things the way the company wanted them to see, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't a great phase that was there. And so an opportunity came up, which I took very gladly, and that's the journey I'm on now.
Yeah. So how many months has it been now?
So I actually took over towards the middle of September of last year. Physically moved to Singapore around November, December. I mean, I was traveling a lot, but physically moved there around November, December. But of course, that was only till March, because then lockdown happened and I came back. So it's coming to a year. It's about 10, 11 months.
So how has it been now that you have a larger space? How is it like working with the other territories which are challenged, and what are the challenges you face, and how are you overcoming them?
So I think I was already overseeing 7 or 8 countries. Now they're 15 or 17, 15 markets. I think it would be fair to say that we've managed to stabilize it very quickly. There were some early calls I had to make. There were some quick management changes that I had to make. As was covered in the media, I changed the CEO and the CFO of our Australia, New Zealand operation, and put in a new team over there. I hired a very senior person as the CEO of Greater North. Greater North is very big for us, which is China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea, South Korea. So that bit, Chuk Chang, and based him in Shanghai to help Michelle Lau, who's our CEO in charge of Dan China. So there were some management changes that we made. We made some country leadership changes in the Philippines. Some more were in the in the process, but because of this COVID, things sort of took a backseat in a way. So very quickly, I think we put in a very good team over there. We've hired some new talent in the area of growth, Hilary Lee, who we've just hired in our solutions business and so on. So I think we are. It's work in progress. I won't say that we are at. I can't put my hand on heart and say we are the best that we can be, but we're definitely better off than where we were a year ago. And directionally, we are in the right direction, absolutely. In spite of the fact that this has been such a challenge year, I would think APAC should possibly, hopefully, if all goes well, make more profits than it did last year, because there were some issues of last year which are hopefully will not be there this year. So it's in the right direction, but these are just baby steps. We still have a long way to go, but the good feeling I get is that at least we've stabilized the operations, put the right people in place. And once I always believe if you get the right talent, if you trust them, if you empower them, they seldom let you down. And so I'm very hopeful about my team.
So how often is it that you have 16 markets? So is it once a month that they're coming into you, or is it once a fortnight?
Oh, well, these days we're connecting a hell of a lot. So my day starts pretty early. So once a month we have a formal connect, which is your month's performance, etc. So that obviously happens, but in sometimes you're talking 3 or 4 times a day. So it's on a need-based basis. I'm not one who's going to micromanage on a these are all very senior, experienced chairmen or CEOs of their countries, and I don't need to be uh, behind them to do what they have to do, but we regularly connect. I also believe that in this time of social distancing, you actually need virtual proximity. Everybody's in a lot of stress. Everybody's there's a lot of anxiety. I mean, young, old, junior, senior. You don't know, are you going to have your job? Are you going to have your client? What's happening? When is this going to end? So everybody has a lot of that anxiety, and I think the one way you can overcome this is by over communicating, and that's really what we've been doing. So because of the time zone differences, Australia on the one hand, to let's
So
say,
that begins at what, 4:30 or 5?
no, I usually start at about 6:30. So
Okay.
6:30 a.m. is when calls start. Singapore starts at about 9 o'clock Singapore time, which is about 6:30 our time. But what is a killer is, and I I'm not very good at finding this work-life balance. I've never been good at that. What is a killer is that now my boss Wendy, for example, who's joined, is in the US. A lot of our senior people are in the US. Our headquarters still continue to be in London, besides Tokyo for Dan, the business outside of that. So that goes on till pretty late in the night, and so the days are becoming very, very, very long. But I'm trying to connect as much as I can and encouraging my teams to connect as much as they can with their teams, because I do believe this is a time where you have to connect more, not less.
Yeah. Any best practices from all the countries that you're overseeing, which you're imparting to each country, since you're the central glue for all of them?
One of the good practices that I've seen have been in markets like Taiwan, like China. These markets actually, a market like China, for example, went into lockdown well before anybody else did. They were the first. If you remember,
Yes.
Wuhan. We have a big office in Wuhan, by the way. We had, I think, 275, 300 people in Wuhan itself. So we were hit much earlier. And the way systematically, the way they handled it, we quickly set up MIT's incident teams. We set up RIT, which was a regional incident team, and the whole process came in. But the way they handled it through this process, the way they communicated it, this was during Chinese New Year, where China, in any case, kind of shuts down, right? For that week, 8 days, 10 days, nobody's there. Through that process, I think those learnings really helped. And we were able to then take that on to countries like Vietnam and Indonesia, which were next getting impacted. And they had these learnings. And by the time it came into India, which was actually a little later on that, we had already seen all these practices. So our BCP had already kicked off. Otherwise you can land into a mess. I mean, people may not have computers at home, from physical infrastructure to bandwidth to security to communication means. I mean, we weren't geared up for the 13 and a half, 14,000 people in APAC that we have. 14,000 people to almost overnight go to work from home. as much of learning as you can possibly get, you have to move around. And I think hats off to my team. They really handle that really very well.
And now then there are the unlocks have happened in Australia much earlier. Then there's been another lockdown. China is continuing. I mean, which of these markets are showing the most robust growth? Is China doing very well?
I think
Korea has recovered very well, in fact, and Taiwan too, from my understanding.
So actually, Taiwan didn't really get very. I mean, everybody was impacted, but was relatively less impacted. They never actually went into a full lockdown.
Yeah.
So there were AB teams, like 50% people coming, but they never went into a full lockdown. So they were relatively less impacted. China, of course, was very impacted, but then it recovered also. It was impacted early and very impacted, but then it recovered also early. Vietnam handled it very well. I mean, the cases until recently, now they've been in Da Nang, there've been some few more cases being found, but there was very controlled. Thailand for now 100 days hasn't had a single local case in the community. Australia was strange; they handled it really very well, and then unfortunately, all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, the state of Victoria, Melbourne, started experiencing a lot, but by and large, what we've done is we've given our people the option straight very early on, right till the end of the year. You don't have to come to office if you don't need to come to office, even if opening up does happen. So I think that eased a lot of tension on people, that there was no just so let's say if tomorrow the government says you can open your offices in Bombay, for example. We're not going to insist that everybody now tomorrow morning come to office. We've already told people till the end of the year, irrespective of what it is, depending upon your need, depending upon your situation. If the offices are open, you're welcome to come, but you don't need to come, right? So I think that kind of eased it a bit. So different markets are in different stages of recovery, but it would be fair to say that everybody has been impacted. I don't think there's any market which is, it's not a normal year for anyone.
I understand. See, I was speaking to another CEO who's part of a large agency network again. He was saying there's pressure coming because for years he's been delivering high profits and giving a big chunk of the profits back to the holding company. Now this year is not looking so good. There's pressure to lay off because things are not really measuring up as much as they expect, and he's been holding on. So across the region, are those pressures being felt, and in India too by you?
Look, we handled it slightly differently. Very early on, and when I say very early on, I'm saying from 1st of April itself, I took the decision that it is better that a lot of people feel a little pain than a few people feel a lot of pain, right? So and the solution to that was starting most from the senior levels, and then up to quite a level. We took salary cuts in various markets. Of course, it differs from market to market, differs from the thing on that. And the key reason for doing that was indeed to save jobs, right? Because it was clear that there's going to be disruption. If there is no revenue beyond a point, you're not going to be able to pay those salaries and pay those people, etc. So rather than get into that scenario, we said, let us all, in a pandemic like this, everybody is going to feel the pain. Nobody is going to go away unscathed, but let us all try to feel a little bit of that pain to minimize, having to do this. Now, having said that, this has taken much longer than what it was anticipated. The recovery has been much slower than what everybody was thinking of at that time. And one thing that every business will have to do, will have to become more efficient. So I hope it doesn't come to that, but it's quite likely, and it will vary from not just from country to country, but which part of the business you're in. So for example, if you're in an events business and there's just no business for 8-10 months, then it's not even fair to be carrying those employees at much reduced salaries, etc., right? So I think those are hard decisions various businesses will have to make on that. And not just on people costs, even on, travel, of course, in any case is stopped. So that's not the thing, but real estate, for example, we have to reconsider our real estate. We've all got large offices and, for thousands of people, which are just lying vacant, which on that. So I don't think there's anybody who's not going to be considering these things. I hope job losses are minimal, as so far they have been minimal. But I don't think you're going to get away without feeling the pain in a global pandemic of this kind.
Yeah, you're mentioning job losses in the advertising sector, but are we seeing my prediction is there's going to be a lot more job losses coming in the next month. That's my gut.
Quite likely. I can't rule that out. It depends. On the other hand, if the festive season really picks up and business starts coming back, maybe not. But it is true that generally there will, on an industry level, you will be seeing job losses. And like I said, it will depend on sector to sector and which part of the business you're in.
Great. I mean, I think this has been a very interesting. Anything else you'd like to add? Because you've gone the entire terrain of from India to Taiwan to China. Anything else you'd like to add on anything that
Well, I'd only like to end on a slightly optimistic note. I am pretty bullish about India as an economy. Yes, this is a big setback, no doubt about it. But given where we are, given the fact that we still have many hundreds of millions of people to come out of poverty into the consuming class, given the fact that in the next 2 to 3 years, 250 million more people are going to come onto the internet, given the fact that agriculture is doing now much better and we're investing in infrastructure, I think in the medium term and long term, India is going to be in a damn good position. We're very industrious and there's no reason to lose faith onto that. These are definitely difficult times. The other bit is that you've got to plan very sensibly, cut your costs as much as you can, where you can, because this is going to be a long haul on that. But don't lose hope, because there is going to be light at the end of this tunnel. And finally, this will bring out winners and losers. Like the saying goes, this will separate the men from the boys. And I think everybody's effort has to be that you become more efficient and more adaptive to it, because I can guarantee you there is a pot of gold at the end of it for India, because the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years are going to be pretty bright for us. I genuinely believe that.
What about on the APAC level?
I think that's largely true at an APAC level also. But when you talk about APAC, there are some countries which are very mature, like Australia, New Zealand, etc. On the other hand, there are countries like Myanmar, Vietnam, India. So level of maturity of each market is different. So the level of pain is going to be different. I mean, some countries like Singapore, for example, which are very tourism dependent in some ways, are going to have to reinvent themselves in that sense, and they're already doing it. In that bit. So it'll be different for different markets on an APAC level. But for India, the future seems pretty bright to me. But you got to have the patience. We're like an elephant. We don't move that fast, but when we move, we really move. And I think we are now going to start to move.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you very much for your time, despite having so many zones to maneuver around. And thank you for the hour and a half you've given us at Indian Television. Tom, thank you to the audiences for staying glued for so long. Really, it's been fun chatting with you. Thank you very much. Have a good day and lots of success to you and recovery to the agency. And hopefully we come out very, very much better for this experience.
I'm sure we will. Thank you for having me over. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.